Is it proper for the judge to grant a directed verdict, reversing a jury's verdict on ownership? To find out, you have to read Suzanne P versus the Joint Board, but it's 15 pages. Don't have time for that? I've got you covered. This is TLDR, Too Long Didn't Read, where I cover New York Court of Appeals cases, and I try to do it in 5 minutes or less. This is the episode on the case of Suzanne P versus the Joint Board of Directors of Erie-Wyoming County Soil Conservation District. The citation for this case is 2024 New York Slip Opinion 00159, published by the New York Court of Appeals on January 16th of 2024. The issue in this case is whether the court, the appellate division, was correct in overturning a directed verdict with respect to the issue of ownership of a dam regarding a wrongful death action. Complicated set of facts. I'll explain in a few moments. The important background information I think is helpful to understand this case is what a directed verdict is. Under CPLR 4401, it's a judgment as a matter of law. A judgment as a matter of law, otherwise known as a directed verdict, is a verdict by a court based upon an argument that there is no rational process by which a jury could find in favor of the opposing party. And you have to come to that conclusion viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the opposing party. So viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the other party, is there any rational process by which the jury could find for the opposing party? If they can't, then you grant the directed verdict. What are the facts here? The facts are that in the area of Buffalo, New York, there's a creek. And that creek historically has had a lot of flooding. So in the 1940s, the federal government built a dam there. And they built the dam and then gave it to basically the state to operate. And the state created the Joint Board of the Directors of Erie-Wyoming County Soil Conservation District and said, your job is to maintain and operate this land, this dam area where the water collects because of the dam. And why is this important? This case is all about the ownership of the dam. Why? Because these dams it's not a design flaw necessarily, but the way that the dam works is it creates an undercurrent that loops and loops and loops over itself. And it's a hidden hazard to swimming in these dam areas. So it's sort of like an attractive nuisance in some ways, where children like to go swim in the creek. And if they get too close to the dam, they get sucked under and they drown. And it's happened to 4 different kids over the past several years. And it happened to a 5th kid, and that's this plaintiff's child. So this 14-year-old child was swimming in this area created by the dam, and he got sucked under by this process, this phenomena called the hydraulic boil, which is that turnover cross current that becomes a loop that drowns children. And it happened there, and there was no signs warning. Despite the fact that 4 other children have died this way, there were no signs saying, don't swim in this area. So the mother of the child who died sued everybody that could possibly be liable, the county, the water districts, the Joint Board of Directors, which is the defendant here. And most of the defendants were dismissed on this case. But the only one that remained was the Joint Board of Erie-Wyoming County Soil Conservation District. And they defended by saying, we're not the owners. We don't have an obligation to put up a sign warning of the danger here. We're not the owners. So they had a jury trial just on the issue of whether this particular defendant is an owner, not the only owner, but is an owner of this dam and the water that collects because of the dam. And at this jury trial, one person testified, the field manager, who's been inspecting the dam for a long time. And he testified, I don't think they own anything. I don't think the Joint Board owns anything, but I've been inspecting it for all this time. At the end of the trial, both sides asked for a directed verdict, and the jury returns a verdict saying that the Joint Board does not own the dam. At that point, the judge grants the directed verdict, reversing what the jury said. They say the judge says grants the directed verdict in favor that the Joint Board does own it. It goes to the appellate division, and they reverse the judge, and they say, no, the Joint Board does not own it, and it gets appealed again to the Court of Appeals. So it's back and forth with whether or not the Joint Board owns this dam, which the federal government built, using this joint board as a sponsor with state money on land owned by private individuals. It's a complicated mess. And in fact, if you watch the hour-long oral arguments in this case, basically everyone says, I don't know who owns the dam. I don't know who owns it. So basically it goes to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals here says they don't jump in and decide it. They don't say whether the joint board owns the dam or not. They say the question here is, was it correct to give a directed verdict? And on that issue, the question is, under CPLR 4401, is there any rational process by which the jury reached the verdict that they reached? That the joint board did not own it. And they say, we don't know who owns it. There's evidence on both sides. And either way would be a fair verdict for the jury. And therefore, the directed verdict was improper. They remit it back to the Supreme Court, say, reinstate the jury's verdict with respect to ownership. And that's the holding here of Suzanne P versus the joint board. There is a dissent by 3 judges who say, this is not, this was the directed verdict was proper. But once again, the holding here is that this is reasonable for the jury to decide either way. And if they decide the joint board did not own it, that's fine. That's the case of Suzanne P versus joint board. If you like what you just saw and want to see more just like it, please hit like or subscribe to let me know.